All right, good afternoon. Let's get started. I've got chapter 3 here, and let's go ahead and get started with that. So chapter 3 is on local governments. Local governments include cities, counties, and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to explain the relationship between all these local governments and the national government, state government. We'll look at the forms of municipal governments, the issues that shape local government outcomes, the responsibilities of counties, special districts, and metropolitan-wide issues. Um, Local governments are the point of sale. They're the point at which the rubber meets the road, so to speak. You get more services from your local governments than any other branch of government, more than the federal government, more than the state government. Your cities, your special districts, your counties are the people. Those are the agencies that employ people that you meet on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, and it's all part of the federalism or federalist form of government we have in our country. As you may or may not know, in American government, we talk about federalism in more detail, and in chapter 2 in this book. But in our system of government in our nation, we have states, and in those states, the states have created what they call local governments, and some have townships, some have counties, some have parishes. In Louisiana, Alaska, they call their counties parishes, and each state is different. They can organize it the way they want to organize it. Some have 15 counties covering an area, as big as Arizona. Some um, Texas, we have 240. California, I think they have maybe 40 counties, and they're the biggest um, state in terms of population. So it's up to the state, it's up to the people within that state, the voters, and their state legislatures, and their representatives in those state legislatures, how they want to organize their states and their local governments. But essentially, the grassroots, they're the ones in charge of these governments. Those are you and I. We are the grassroots. We're at the top of the soil there, and we determine the form of government we want. Now, in our states, over the 240-year period of our republic, there's developed two streams, two rails of thought about what should be the relationship between the state and its local government, or vice versa. What's the relationship between local government, cities, counties, and the state government? And those two types of ideas, ways of thinking, concepts are found in a rule and a doctrine, both named after judges. The Dillon Rule and the Cooley Doctrine. That way you can differentiate them. The Dillon Rule is named after a federal judge, John Dillon, and still followed by most of the states, as you can see on the map, those states in red, and that would be Texas. The theory is that the state created, through their state laws, through the Constitution of the state, they created um, the cities, the counties, and getting the county, here we go, through the state laws, the state of Texas laws, they created the counties, they created the cities, they created the special districts. And so they can change it by adopting state laws. The state legislature can. So they're going to grant only those powers that they feel are necessary. And they can, in effect, take them back, so should the state legislature want to. So in a way, it's kind of a unitary form of government that they have, like in Britain or France, where the national government is it, man. They're the ones in charge, and they decide what the local governments can and cannot do. So that's similar to what we have in Texas. The state government says, okay, you can do this, but you can't do that. Now that's different from the Cooley Doctrine. This was a different doctrine, an opposing doctrine named after a Michigan judge. Now it's followed in those blue states like Ohio, Iowa, Montana, Utah, Nevada, New Mexico, Alaska, South Carolina, West Virginia, Massachusetts. Now these states, they feel that local government is a matter of absolute right, and the state may not take it away. So it is an absolute right as to what they can and cannot do. And the state legislature cannot do it unless there's a massive shift in the state legislature, and the state legislature proposes a constitutional amendment and the voters approve it. So it takes a lot more in those blue states. But in the state legislature in Texas, it would take a simple majority vote in the state legislature to change the laws that would affect local government structure. Now, to give you an overview, kind of a 5,000 foot level overview of local government in the context of our system, in Texas, there are over 5,000 of these local governments. And that's what Texans like and Texans got. And part of our culture encourages, and it goes hand in hand with this. Our individualistic political culture demanded that local control be given to the local people. And so you have all these governments, and sometimes they overlap. Sometimes boundaries will cut a city in half, like the two school districts, like what we have here in Webb County. It can be very confusing for the voters, for you and I. Who am I voting for, and why is my neighbor across the street voting for a different person, even in a different school district? So it can be quite a challenge for the voters. And that often does lead to decreases in voting and kind of a apathy among local voters, because these really important issues, schools, and whether you're going to get your garbage picked up weekly or bi-weekly or recycling, all of these issues are really done at the local level. The President Trump and the Congress, Nancy Pelosi, they're not going to be deciding on those kinds of issues. Let's see if there's anything else. I think that's about it. Intergovernmental relations. This is a term that describes merely the challenge of the grassroots when they are in their communities, in their city governments. And, well, you know, the city's in charge of this, but the county's in charge of that. And I want this done, but the city says go over to the county, or vice versa. So for us, being in these cities, it's somewhat stressful and confusing and mind-boggling. And so there seems to be a need for better communications, not only between governments, but between governments and their citizens. And this is an important aspect of intergovernmental relations. Sometimes county commissioners and city councils don't agree, and they can butt heads. Although in Webb County and City of Laredo, because you have a very traditional patron aspect of the culture here, and there's a lot of intermarriage and family relationships, there's a lot of more cooperation in Webb County between the city, the county, not so much the school districts, but because they're on their own, and they deal with a specific, unique aspect of life that is K through 12 education. Now, in the state as a whole, another challenge is of diversity, although that doesn't exist in Webb County, Laredo. We're a very monocultural society, but overall, the state has aspects of diversity that presents some challenges. And again, that going back to the voter apathy, I think that has to do with um, a lot of the confusion that goes on in the minds of most Americans and Texans that, well, I need to be voting in this presidential election, and that's all that matters. Actually, if you're talking about the things that are going to impact your daily life, you should be concerned about who's running for community college board, who is running for your school district, who is running for your city council, because they're the ones who decide you're going to wear a mask. No, you're not going to wear a mask. This is how much your school taxes are going to be, which is the most amount of taxes you're going to pay on your property. You don't realize that, but some of you might who own property. So anyway, now a little bit more contextualizing this. What adds to the confusion is, we live in a micro political statistical area, Laredo, Webb County, and it's a center of politics and government here in this county in Southwest Texas. And so you have a lot of federal buildings and county buildings and state buildings and city buildings. You have the U.S. Post Office and courts. You have the county courthouses, the sheriff's office, county jails. But let's try to break it down and break it out. First, let's go over the 5,000 local government units. First, really the largest, perhaps the oldest, are the counties or municipios. Let me show you a video on that, on how did we get the 254 that we have. Take a look at this, see what you think.
You know, Texas is made up of 254 local counties, and while Alaska may be bigger in land, it only has 30 county equivalents. In fact, no other state comes close to having as many counties as Texas. So how did Texas get to 254? Well, let me show you. Counties go all the way back to Spanish rule, when they were called municipios and centered around towns and settlements. In 1836, when Texas became its own country, the 23 Spanish municipios became Texas's first counties. As you see, these counties were mostly in the southern and eastern parts of the state, because that's where the people were. Out west was simply Bexar County, an enormous landmass reaching all the way to modern-day Wyoming. In 1837, Texas began establishing its own counties, with Houston County being the first, named after the new president of Texas. Thank you. Next came Fannin County, then Robertson, and so forth, bringing the total to 29. For the next few years, Texas slowly added new counties as the settlers moved west. Then in 1845, Texas joined the United States of America. And by the next year, its 37 counties swelled to 67 counties. And it didn't slow down there. Every new county needed a new name. So many took the names of Texas heroes like Texas Ranger Jack Hayes, thank you, or Three-Legged Willie, thank you. In 1850, Texas sold land to the U.S. and its shape became what it is today. But that didn't stop county growth, and 9 new counties were added. The basic idea for creating new counties was that nobody should be more than one day's horse ride from the courthouse. People need to be close to the essential services counties provide, and the counties need to be close to the people. So as the population spread out, so did the counties. By 1860, there were 152 Texas counties, each one unique in geography, shape, and population. One census showed Rusk being the most populated at 15,000 Texans, while Zavala County counted only 26. One of those new counties was Greer County, and even though it was north of the Red River, well, Texas claimed it as its own. That is, until the U.S. Supreme Court said otherwise. The times of the Civil War slowed growth dramatically. But during Reconstruction, Texas once again started a steady rise, especially as West Texas and the Panhandle became safer for settlement. In 1876, the enormous Young Territory was divided into 50 counties, using, well, less than creative methods. But who doesn't love a good grid? Then in the 1880s, some of Texas's largest counties were split to allow for local government. Tom Green County alone birthed 10 different counties. A few more were added until finally in 1931, Logan County was created as the last of the Texas counties, bringing the total to 254. So that's how we got here. But the reason why is even more important. It's because local government run by locally elected folks best serves the community. It did more than 175 years ago, and it still does today.
All right, so the county's 254. Webb County, being our county, created after the declared independence in 1836, but before the Civil War, we had our own county. Although it was smaller, it just hugged the river, and there was actually for a short time a county out here called Encinal, but they combined it with Webb later on. We have 1,202 cities, 5,000 unincorporated communities. The smallest community is not incorporated. All that means is there's no government structure, there's no mayor. Services are provided by the county is Guerra, which with a population of 6 women and 2 men, I believe. Guerra's, I think it's over in Duval or Jim Webb County, right next door to Webb County. There's 1,101 school districts, and again, their boundaries overlap with cities. Sometimes they'll extend over a couple counties. In Webb County, we have 3. We have Webb Consolidated, that's down here, this blue area, and we have UISD, that's this big yellow area, which is most of Webb County. They have the most students, I think, 20,000 students. And there's Little Laredo Independent School District, which of course is the 3 high schools and so on. The 2,392 non-educational special districts do special things and only 1 or 2 special things. They might provide just water service, and that's it. And they have a separately elected board and a director, and they get to tax, and it's up to the voters whether they want these or not. First, we're going to cover municipal governments and talk about, by law, the 2 types of municipal governments and the 3 types of ways they can govern themselves by law. Again, by order of the Constitution of the great state of Texas, they've got to organize themselves in a particular manner, and I do want you to know this stuff. So we'll be studying this for the test coming up here. It'll be due very quickly. So the Texas cities with a population of over 200, but with a population of 5,000 or less, are called general law cities. And so there's things in the Constitution and in the other laws which outline what they can and cannot do and how they can be organized. And they're controlled by all those laws. There's 900 of the 1,200 cities that are those kinds of cities. So Rio Bravo, El Cenizo, those are general law cities. Some of them have grown above 5,000, but again, they have to do an election to change over to the home rule. That's what we are. We have our own separate constitution, and we can do a little bit more. We can adopt a structure of local government with some limitations, and we can set a property tax rate as high as 2.5% of assessed value. Now, there's 300 of those, and they're all the large cities. Houston is the largest with 2.3 million. Now, we're the, 9th largest city with around that many people. And what else can we do? Well, there's a couple other things that we can do as a home rule city that the general laws can't. Now, keep this in mind. I may ask you about this. There's 3 powers that state governments can do. They can that cities can do. Cities, but states cannot recall. Cities can do an initiative, which is when a citizen drafts a measure and they propose it, and they put it on the ballot and the people vote on it. A recall is when the voters decide, hey, I don't like this guy, I'm going to yank him out of office before his term is up. And a referendum is when the council will put something on the ballot and ask the voters, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? Do you want to repeal an existing ordinance? Do you want to approve an ordinance? So those things are allowed under the home rule system. Okay, so those are the two types. Now, the forms of municipal governments that a general law or home rule can have are three. They are mayor, council, council manager, and commission. And there are two subtypes of the mayor council, strong and weak, very easy to remember. So let's go through these one at a time. First, let's go through the mayor council. In that one, you have the strong mayor first. The strong mayor is the chief executive and legislative leader. So you combine two branches of government really in the mayor, okay? Chief executive, he's the CEO, chief executive officer, but he also sits in the legislature and he runs the council. And you have to have a supermajority to veto any actions by the mayor. He prepares the budget. He is the executive. He fires and hires people like a president, a governor of a powerful governor state. And he's elected by the entire city. And some say it's too powerful. Now, it's used in big cities. That's why some of these mayors can outlaw straws, like Mayor de Blasio of New York. It's odd what they can do, but they have a lot of powers. And Houston does use this strong mayor, and they're the largest city that uses it. Other large cities don't use this. Here's what we call an organizational chart showing the power relationship between the mayor. I think it might be still Sylvester Turner. I'm not sure. Maybe he's been replaced. But he's paid a salary. His salary's probably gone up. I don't know what it is now. Probably close to $250,000. But the mayor is in charge of all those departments, from fire, police, finance, housing and development, legal, library, and so on. And these people serve at the pleasure of the mayor, and he's responsible for the citizens of Houston. He's elected by all the citizens of Houston. Okay. Now, the weak mayor is where you have a mayor has limited administrative powers. City council can override his veto very easily with a simple majority. He's not a powerful legislator. He's not an executive. The council passes ordinances and they prepare the budget. Now, he can vote in case of a tie to break the tie, but that's about it. He recognizes people to speak at the meetings. He's first among equals, but he doesn't have veto power. Now, this is more of what we have at the governor level. More about that in chapter 9. Cities have it in Texas or a similar system. Oftentimes what they'll do is they'll have a city administrator, but they have a mayor who's weak, and council kind of directs things. Conroe is a good example of a medium-sized city that does this. Okay, that's the mayor council form. Now, the second form that a government can do is a council manager. Now, most of the large home rule cities, the 300 that are home rule, they use this system. Laredo is one of those. In fact, we pay our city manager the most. I think, what is it, $800,000? It is an obscene amount of money, but he gets paid $800,000. That's twice what the president of the United States makes. $800,000. I didn't stutter. And the city manager is appointed. They go through an interview process like we did with our current city manager, and he's chosen by a majority of the council. Now, he serves at the pleasure of the council, so they could fire him. However, he's under contract. He earns that $800,000, I guess, and he's contracted for 2 or 3 years. Now, if he's fired, if 5 out of the 9 vote to remove him, he still gets his contract pay. So if he's into his first year and he's contracted for 3 years, he's still going to get paid 1.6 million for the next 2 years. Just keep that in mind when you hear things on the news about that. But the mayor is weak in these kinds of cities. Now, these kinds of cities do respond better to the elites and the middle class rather than working class, because people that are middle class, like you or me, we're more aware of our surroundings, who's responsible for what. And so we'll go to the correct official and say, hey, we'll knock on the door. I need my road fixed. My garbage hasn't been picked up. You'll pick up the phone and you'll call. Now the council, the city council, the mayor and city council act as in 3 capacities. They still pass the laws, the ordinances, like you got to wear a face mask. Number 2, they do supervise the city manager, but not on a day-to-day basis. They call them up and say, hey, my constituent is having trouble. Who do I talk to about this? And so the city managers say, okay, I'll get on that. Thank you very much. So they do select, they hire the city manager and they supervise him. But it is supposed to be, in theory, hands off, because the idea here behind the whole city manager, hiring a city manager, is you're going to get a professional who's got a degree, usually in public administration, business administration, political science, and they know the theory behind what is best in governing a city. What's the best method? What are some of the best things? Because there's no Democrat, no Republican way to pave a street. There's just the correct, most efficient, most cost-efficient way to pave a road. Okay? So these people are supposed to be professionals hired for their expertise. And this was a theory that came about in the late 19th, early 20th century. And cities that were growing larger realized that, you know, we've got to clean up the cities. We've got to improve the conditions of our cities. And what would be something that could do that? Well, we've got to develop a new theory of managing a city that just goes after the problems, attacks the problems. Well, let's separate the executive from the lawmaking, like we do between the Congress and the president. And with separation of powers, you know, we're not going to have tyrannical mayors that'll favor one group over another. We'll have a professional, hired professional with some expertise, some knowledge, and he'll do the right job. So he oversees the executive branch of the city. So he oversees all the various departments. That's what the city manager does. So the city manager's power comes from the city charter. He's given authority over all the department heads. So here's the graph you have in your book. The citizens of San Antonio vote for mayor and city council, and they in turn vote for or appoint a city manager. And then the city manager is head of over all these agencies with, 20, 30, depends on the size of the city, personnel. Some cities like Laredo, you have hundreds of policemen, firemen, and I should get that picture of Landon out of there. He's retired now. I think Orfila might be. He's already retired too. But anyway, the citizens of Laredo, we elect the mayor and city council, but they in turn appoint the city manager, and he runs the city. There's our charter, and we incorporated years ago, over 150 years ago. We kept the power. We can have an initiative, recall. We've recalled officials recently. And again, the power of the mayor is limited and ceremonial. He is weak. And we use this system. Nationally, the big cities use it: Texas, Dallas, Fort Worth, San Antonio. So most of these big cities use this. Now, the third one is commission. The commission type is where each department is responsibility of a single commissioner. and the voters select one official to act as an executive and legislator. So they vote for a commissioner, but then they also are a road and bridge supervisor. They vote for another commissioner. He's also the sanitation, water, and sewer director. So you have 5, 7 officials, but they each have a department they're in charge of. And together they make the laws, these commissioners. Now, a lot of people in my profession don't like this fusion of legislative and executive functions. Intuitively or logically or commonsensically, it probably wouldn't work out, and it's not used anymore in Texas because you combine these functions and you're going to get some infighting because these guys over their departments are going to be jealous of each department. In the perspective of, hey, my department is more important than yours. I need more resources. So there's going to be a lot of tugging back and forth, and so critics dislike it, I think, from that perspective. Now, it did start in Galveston. It was used for a time, but there are aspects of it used, but it's not used really. Courts have declared that it did violate civil rights laws, and so there can be no single-member council districts under this commission system. So we have a lot of laws and rules that govern these municipal governments. They aren't elected by party label. That's what nonpartisan elections mean. However, because we really don't realize that these city councils make an impact, there's a low voter turnout here because they're not talking about these big issues like rioting or BLM or whatever. They're talking about, well, is my garbage going to get picked up? Well, you just expect that. And so I guess we just don't vote. And the elections are more personal. They're less issue oriented, I think, at the local level. Now, how do we elect our officials? There's basically 2 ways, at large and single member. We have a combination of both. We elect our mayor citywide, and we elect councilmen in districts. So you're in a separate district, sitting, watching me now, in a different district than I am. I'm in Rodriguez's 3rd district in East Laredo. You might be in North Laredo or South Laredo in the 1st district or 2nd district. I'll show you a map showing you that in a moment. Cumulative voting is used in a few elections, and that's when you might have 3 votes, and then you can cast as many for 1 or more candidates. Some have hybrid elections where council members are elected on a citywide basis, and then others are elected on a district basis. Houston has gone to that. We've had a recent proposal to do that, but we turned it down. There must be a redistricting every 10 years after the census. And some cities do have term limits, but it's up to the city. We have them in Laredo, so the mayor is termed out after 2 terms, and so are the councilmen. However, if you serve as mayor for 2 terms, you can come back and run like Betty Flores is doing for a city council seat. Okay, here's an example from our own cities. Mayor Pete Sines, picture there in the top right, he represents the entire city, and all the voters, registered voters, can vote for him in all those districts. Those are the council districts. The purple, the green district is where I live, so I can only vote for that councilman, but I can also vote for the mayor. Now, my councilman is not up for re-election. He's not one of these 2 guys. One of these 2 guys might be your councilman, Rudy Gonzalez in Council District 1. That's the Figueroa High School area. And Merck Martinez III is from the Heights area to South Laredo, where LC South Campus is. He represents that area. And he won't be up for 2 more years. This is my candidate. Again, he won't be up for another 2 years as well. Vidal Rodriguez. I won't tell you where I live, but I live in this district. So now this guy I think is up. Yeah, I believe so. Torres, yeah. I believe he's up for election. I think he's running again. I'm not sure. I think so. But he's in the council district where the cemeteries are, the Laredo Medical Center, that area there on Saunders. That's his district area there. And then Velma, she represents Northeast Laredo, where the lake is and where the energy arena or whatever they call it now is. And then Dr. Martinez, he represents North Laredo, um, even out to the truck centers out there. But he represents, the hospital north, all that area, Doctors Hospital, Alexander Estates. You could say the higher income areas, right, of Laredo are in his district. He's a doctor, right? So he represents those areas, that area. George Altgeld, he's not going to run again. He ran against a guy who was recalled, and he won in 2016. A guy was recalled because he was arrested for selling crack cocaine, Jorge Vera, and he was booted out of office. And Altgeld ran for his seat and won a 4-year term. But I think he said, nah, too much. I'm going to go back to my law practice. And he represents the 7th district, which is out Mines Road from the mall west up that side of the freeway, uh, up Mines Road. Okay. And finally, Bali represents downtown Laredo and the main campus. So he represents that area. Each of these same population around, as of the 2010 census, around 28, 29, 30,000 people in each district. Okay, persons, not registered voters. Okay. Municipal governments are becoming more urbanized, higher educated population, and are always seeking to develop economically. Houston has one of the most diverse political systems with its multitude of election systems, and a strong mayor system and a very diverse cultural and ethnic population. Dallas has had some black and white racial tensions and shootings. Weirdly enough, we've had black citizens shoot black officers. South Texas has Latino leaders at all levels. Laredo is a great example of that. Now, the services. Cities provide all these services and more, but essentially these are the biggies: police, fire, water, streets, sewer, sanitation, parks, and rec. These are all the things that they do. El Metro, pools, playgrounds. Um, they pay their employees good, and they pay their employees good when they retire. So employee pensions are a growing financial concern because cities have to be smart investors and hopefully avoid bankruptcy because they've obligated themselves to pay through their taxation pensions, retirement amounts. Um, Zoning, something new that has been around for only about 100 years and it's new to Laredo, but it's only been around for 40 years in Laredo. But zoning receives a lot of attention. What zoning is planning. And what planning is we're going to plan our city. Let me show you what I mean. We're going to plan our city. Whoa, what is this? Well, this map shows you the zoning in Laredo. All these different brown, blue, orange, green, whatever. These are different zones, and these mean what you can and what you cannot build in Laredo. So, for instance, the brown areas are family dwellings, probably single family dwellings, homes, right? Single family homes. The darker browns might be smaller houses. Yeah. And then there's areas in here, it's hard to see because the map is small, where you'll have multi-residential or apartments. Those will be designated on these kinds of maps. And then you have these blue manufacturing business areas. Green would be wild areas, or what's it called? What's the term? Ranches, or I can't think of the term. Agrarian or agricultural. That's not the right word, but they could be future parks. that kind of thing. So that would be these green areas on the map on the right. Okay. So anyway, that's part of zoning. They're also figuring out, okay, where are we going to have these future parks, future roads? This is what cities do. They plan all these lines out here. They haven't really materialized, but that's what they plan to do. Now, the cities don't have enough money for basic services, most of them. Now, Laredo does. Don't kid yourself. Laredo actually has, I mean, we pay our city manager $800,000. $800,000. And we have a very good fire and police department. So we do have enough money for basic services. And we do have usually a good cushion. We get our money from sales tax. A certain amount from every dollar you spend goes to the city, and from property taxes. So where you're sitting, the house, the apartment, whatever structure you're in, somebody pays property tax on that, and they pay it to the city. And they get that money, and they go out and pay policemen, firemen, and parks and rec people, and sewer workers, and so on. And they got to pick up your trash, and they go out and buy some trucks. Okay. Now, sales depends on the sale of goods and services and products such as oil and gas, right? So when oil and gas industry suffers, Texans and Texas cities will see a dip in their sales tax and maybe services. So they might be doing well, they got some good police, fire, blah, blah, blah. And then suddenly oil and gas prices go down, production goes down, regulations come down, go up. We're going to quit fracking. We're not going to allow it. And so it maybe hurts the industry. And so revenues go down. And so you see people being laid off and so on. And this can negatively affect cities. Cotulla, other cities out in the fracking area, Eagle Ford Shale area can be negatively affected by that. So here's just revenues from a few years ago showing you that the money they get. It's quite impressive. Let me see if I can. Here, let me get. You can see the revenues for general governmental funds. You can see taxes are, what is that, 87 million. Licenses and permits, 6 million, and so on. Charges for service, 36 million. That's your water bill. Blah blah blah. So you 154 million dollars, right? And then you have general government, public safety, 100 million. Okay, that's fire and police, public works. That's your road department, 6 million. Health and welfare, cultural, recreation, parks and rec, 14 million. So 154 million. So that's where governmental funds. That's where that goes to. There's other funds called proprietary. That means they've got to go to transit or bridges or solid waste, and that's where they get their revenues. So that is the amount of money that is gotten or received and how much is spent. Okay. So as I mentioned, the primary source of revenue is property taxes. Property taxes is where most of the revenue comes from for city governments, and property taxes from the other governments also is included in your tax bill. If you own property, you realize this. So for instance, I'll give you an example, not in the book this time, they took it out, but in a city like Laredo or Huntsville, you pay an amount to your city. So in this case, the city of Huntsville, they value your property. They go out and they look at your property and they say, okay, it's worth this much, $180,000. And then they figure out what the tax rate is by law, how far it can go. And they say, okay, this is how much you owe. And then there are things called ceilings or exemptions, and all these things are factored in. And then you get this amount of 319. That's your actual money that you're going to have to pay for taxation. And then you also pay some to the county and the school districts. School districts get the most in probably every community. So UISD, LISD get the most money out of every dollar you pay in property tax. They're going to take 50 cents of every dollar. The rest goes to the counties and cities and colleges and whatever else. But most of it goes to K through 12. The homestead is something you need to do if you are a property owner. Listen up. If you are a property owner, do this right now. I want you to go to the Webb County Appraisal Office website and fill out a homestead form and do whatever it takes to get that done, because that reduces your tax burden so you can get more money in your pocket. Okay, so do it today. You do it. I forget what the home, I think it's 15,000. I don't know what it is. It probably is the same. And that will reduce your tax burden for the school district. And so your taxable value is reduced to 89,000, and the tax rate they would have charged would be that, but it's reduced, and so you end up paying only 595. So you'll see a drastic amount reduction, and if you're over 65, you'll see even a greater reduction. Now, none of you are probably over 65, doesn't affect you, but still you can homestead, so do that, okay? All right. A couple more things before we conclude for right now, and then we'll jump into counties in my next lecture. But the last thing I wanted to do for under cities is, because of state and federal government monies shrinking, what cities do is they will try to attract businesses with what they call tax incentives. Ladies and gentlemen, the only thing I can tell you, well, I can tell you a lot, but let me sum it up. Let me sum it up this way. What they do is they say, we're not going to charge you sales tax or even maybe a percentage of the property tax on your property for a certain period of time if you come to Laredo. That's what they do. And so businesses go, oh yeah, that'll save me 10,000 a year, 20,000, whatever it is. And they'll come to Laredo, they'll come to Houston, Dallas, El Paso, and that's what they do. These tax increment reinvestments. It's controversial because after 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, the business leaves, goes bankrupt, but goes to another state because they're offering better incentives. And meanwhile, the city didn't get any property tax, and yet they paved the streets and they fixed the sewers. And so who got stuck with the bill? That's right, the citizens of Laredo, El Paso, whatever. So that's why these tax incentive zones can be controversial. So with that, we'll conclude by going back a little bit to the beginning. Again, in our federal form of government, we have two ways of looking at state and local governments: the Cooley and Dillon rule and doctrine. The Dillon rule says that cities and counties are creatures of the state. Whatever the state says goes. Cooley doctrine, some states have adopted a different approach. Once you're given power, that's it. Only under extraordinary circumstances can we change the relationship. There's lots of local governments. It's confusing. And territories often overlap. We have some challenges, and we've got to overcome those by straightening out our understanding. So let's straighten it out. 254 counties, 1,200 cities, 1,100 school districts, 2,392 non-educated. I'll go into those in the second part. And there's two, we're going to just cover cities right now, two types of city governments. There's general law and home rule. General law are the small cities controlled by the Constitution and the legislature. Home rule, bigger cities, and they have more flexibility in how they can organize themselves and how much they can charge in taxation. They have these powers that general law don't: recall, initiative, referendum. Basically, these are ways of putting things on the ballot in your city. Okay, that's what home rule cities have that general law cities don't. And there's three forms of government, meaning ways of organizing the top officials, the elected and appointed officials. The mayor council, the council manager, and the commission. The mayor council, there's a strong mayor type where the mayor is the head guy and he's part of that legislative branch. And the council's got to really gang up on him before they can get changes if they want change to veto or things. He's very powerful. He appoints people, he fires people. You're fired, get out of here. Like, you're fired, Trump would say. Anyway, a lot of big cities have it. A lot of people don't like it because it's very politicized and you can pick favorites and so on. The only city that really has it in Texas is the large city that is Houston. Weak mayor, the mayor is weak. You can't do much without the council's okay. The council's got to approve everything. The budget, the city administrator, the guy who runs day-to-day operations. And the council passes ordinances. Now the mayor votes, but most of the time only in case of a tie vote. And he recognizes people to speak at the meetings, and there are cities that just have a weak mayor, but even Conroe has some type of administrator. Now, the second type is the council manager, which we have in Laredo. The mayor and council together hire a guy to be the executive, and this is that professional. The council and the mayor still pass the ordinances. They oversee the manager. They can fire him, but he's contracted for 2-3 years. Usually the average lifespan of a city manager is 3 years. And the mayor and city council is independently selected. The mayor's power is ceremonial, persuasive, and we use this form in Laredo. Commission, the third type, is where you elect commissioners, 5, 7, and each commissioner is over a department. And this one's not used anymore, but it was used in Galveston. There's ways to elect people at large, and single member are the most common. So the mayor, he's elected by the entire city, and then each councilman is elected in these districts. So services, many services, you're familiar with them. Some you're not familiar with, like zoning. And revenue comes from sales and property tax, mainly. And it's a lot of money because they value your property and they get hundreds of dollars for each property, including commercial property. And it could be worth, $1 million. That's a lot of tax dollars. And there's other ways of generating economic revenue through economic development. So we'll conclude there, and we'll pick it up with a second part in a moment.